What's up, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. So before I get started with this video, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I know that I have rebranded this channel like 11 times. Y'all just bear with me. I'm just trying to figure out what works for me. I'm trying to figure out what kind of content people want to see. And, you know, I'm just trying different things. So here we are. Now to the story as promised. So I got to give y'all a little bit of backstory before I jump into what actually occurred. When I was probably a sophomore in college, that was around 2005, I believe. My mom started going to another church for whatever reason. Her season was up with our old church, and she went to another church. So I was in New Jersey at the time. I had spent the summer with my grandmother, as I usually do. Since we moved down south, you know, I always go back for the summer before she passed away. So that's where I was. And she was telling me about the church, and I was very, very excited. You know, I had heard nothing but good things about this lady. And I wanted to go. I wanted to see, you know, what all the hype was about. So we're going to call her Pastor Anderson. We're going to call her Pastor Anderson. So she was telling me about Pastor Anderson. She was ranting and raving. So of course I'm like, okay, you know, I want to go home. I'm raised in the church. So when you talk about a good church service, some good preaching, I'm there for it. You know what I mean? I'm present. So during that time, while I was still in New Jersey, my mom, she kind of like has a youth ministry. That's her ministry. She's a pastor and everything. But at the time she was a minister, and she took to the youth. That was always her thing. So she had these two girls staying with her. We'll name them Amy and Shantae. She had Amy and Shantae staying with her. And, you know, I was getting a little jealous. I'm like, hold up, that's my mother, you know. She was telling us all the fun things she was doing with Amy and Shantae. They were staying at the house. She was mentoring them and everything. So at this point, I'm like, hey, I want to go home. I want to go home, Grandma. So I want to go home. So I finally get there. And it turns out that Shantae and Amy, they kind of, you know, they have a little bit of issues or whatever. It's not really evident at first, but as I spent more and more time with them, you know, I would get kind of a feel for the things that I was hearing about them. So, and this is relevant to the story further on. So, you know, me and Shantae, we became like this. Amy kind of got close with my sister. But me and Shantae, we were like this. So, of course, that caused a rift with them because, you know, Amy was feeling some type of way. Like, hold up. You know, we came here together. Why you leaving me for this girl? So, whatever the case may be, Shantae got... Oh, my God, I forgot which ones I named them. Yeah, Shantae. Shantae got really comfortable with me, and she started telling me, you know, how she was really close with the pastor and everything. So this is making me excited. I'm like, okay, you know, you close with her, that's an end for me. At that point, I was very much fascinated with like pastors and preaching and the inner courts and the, you know, the entourage and just the look of it. You know, I was 19 years old, something like that. I didn't know any better. So I just was like, okay, you're close with her. That means I'll get close with her. That means, you know, this is going to be a good experience all around. Little did I know, honey, the hell I was signing up for. Fast forward, you know, some things started happening between everybody. But me and Shantae, I would always figure out, like, it was always some crazy mess that we were getting into. And, you know, my mom would say little things, and me being a rebellious teenager, I'm like, okay, you know, you got this problem, so that's just gonna make me get closer with her, you know. And, you know, my mom would always say little things. She would tell me how she felt about different things, and that just pushed me forward, you know, wanting to explore my friendship and do what I want to do, because I felt like I was grown. I'm like, I'm off in college. Technically, I'm only in your house because I'm home from college. You really can't tell me what to do. You know, that was my mindset. It was stupid, but that's where I was at. So, we started going to church more and more. I was enjoying myself. I loved it. You know, I got to speak with the pastor a little bit here and there, Pastor Anderson, a little bit here and there, but it wasn't enough for me. You know what I mean? I wanted to be in there because that's what I like in church. I like to be close to my pastor. I like to be able to talk to him. I like to be able to reach out to him when I want to and everything. But for some reason, it was like God was blocking this. You know, he was really, really blocking this. So I'm like, okay, I like this church. I want to be, I want to be close to this lady. Why can't I be close to her? So these are the questions that I'm asking as time goes on. So I remember one night, this was during the time when Shantae and I were subletting an apartment from a friend. We'll call her Mary. We were subletting an apartment from Mary. And again, I was in college. I couldn't park my car on campus, so my car would go to Shantae's parents' house while I was in school, and she would kind of like come pick me up, and we would leave, and we would do all these things. And so when we started going to church on our own, we would drive my car. So one night, Pastor Anderson called Shantae and was like, I want you to come by the house. So of course we're together. She's in my car, so I'm like, okay, yes, this is my end right here. This is my end. I'm about to be. Child, we get there, and I'm told to stay in the car. Pastor Anderson and Shantae, they're outside of Pastor Anderson's house. They go off in the distance, but I can still hear them. It's a quiet night. We're out in the country, so it's not much other than the little animal sounds or whatever. So I'm from my vantage point, I really can hear what they're saying. And I heard Pastor Anderson say, "You let her take my place." So here go me, like, what? Take your place? Automatically, I'm like, okay, she's talking about me because we hanging heavy at this point. We do everything together. She got my car. When I don't feel like staying at school, I'm staying at her parents' house. We go to church together. We do everything together. So she like, you let her take my place. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe she's talking about Amy because Shantae and Amy was like this too. But Shantae gets in the car, and as we're riding down the road, she's really, really quiet. So I'm kind of freaked out at this point because I'm like, all right, what happened? You're not saying anything. You were all talkative on the way here, but now you're quiet. I'm like, what happened? So she proceeds to tell me what Pastor Anderson said. Oh, I let you take her place, and we're too close, and I used to be close with her, and now here you go, and blah blah blah. So I'm confused. I'm like, I know you said y'all was close, but isn't this like your pastor? Like, what does that have to do with me taking her place? So come to find out, Shantae used to stay with Pastor Anderson, and whatever happened, whatever went on, they were close, and it was just different things. So further on in our stay at this church, again, like I said, things started happening. So right around that time, my mother and my sisters moved back to New Jersey to take care of my grandmother. My grandmother was really sick at that point, and she needed care. So my mom was like, forget this. She left me the house, basically, and she booked it, and she went on to New Jersey. So I'm going to this church by myself at this point. I'm really thinking I'm grown. I'm happy. I'm liking this. I'm like, okay, maybe that was just a misunderstanding. Maybe I didn't hear what I heard. In my heart of hearts, I knew that I had heard what I heard, but I'm telling my little naive 19-year-old self that I didn't hear what I just heard. So boom, I keep going to the church. So one night, me, Shantae, and Amy are in Shantae's parents' house, and we're having a discussion. And Amy was kind of like, we were saved. Oh, I thought we were saved, but Amy was saved. I mean, she was saved, so little did I know, she was kind of like, not a spy for Pastor Anderson, but she would go back and report the things that we were saying. Now, again, we're teenagers. So when stuff is going wrong, when stuff is going on, you know, of course we're discussing it. We're putting our little spin on it or whatever the case may be. So at this point, I got exasperated and I said the word bitch or whatever. It was in reference to Pastor Anderson, but it wasn't in reference to Pastor Anderson. But Amy put her own little spin on it, and she called Pastor Anderson and told her that I had called her a bitch. So next thing I know, I get a phone call from my mother. My mother's like, "What happened? What were you talking about?" She was, you know, my mother's all riled up, and when my mother get riled up, honey, she out here, right? So I'm like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" So she slows down. She starts explaining to me what happened. Pastor Anderson called her and said, "Your daughter called me a bitch," and blah, blah, blah. And my mother said, like, "What you want me to do, beat her?" Like, I'm 800 miles away. I wasn't there to hear what she said. This is coming from such and such, from Amy, who has a history of lying. Even you said that. So, like, so I look over, and my first inclination is to look at Amy because me and Shantae have been together the whole time. So I know she didn't call and say nothing. The only other person in the room was Amy. So she said, you know, she called Pastor Anderson and told her that I had said these things. So I get the call again from Pastor Anderson, and she's saying different things, and that's where, y'all, that's where the beef began. Okay, I'm gonna tell y'all right there. I didn't know we had beef. I thought I had explained myself and it was over, but no, you know, this wasn't that kind of thing. This wasn't that kind of party. So a lot of people were like kind of making insinuations about Shantae and I. They were saying different things. You know, we were like the talk of the church. I guess because by herself, Shantae had a lot of issues and people knew that. And so I became guilty by association. So basically, they were putting me with her, even though my behavior was not anything like hers or previously, but she didn't show me that side of her much. You know, but they were saying these things. I guess they couldn't let go of the past. Pastor Anderson was keeping it going. Everybody, you know, it was a big old thing. So, we became ushers. You know, we had a church meeting, and Pastor Anderson told me and Shantae basically that we were going to be ushers, so that we can kind of work on our reputation in the church and this, that, and the third. So again, I'm 19. I'm naive. My mother's not here. I'm here by myself, basically. I want this woman's acceptance. I don't understand why I can't get her acceptance. So I'm willing to do what I need to do at this point to make her happy. And maybe, all these issues will go away. Wrong. We get on the post, and I'm on this side. Shantae is on this side. And we're standing there, and people are just ogling us, y'all. They are gawking at us. My mom went out. She bought me all this stuff. She bought me just like the uniform, the stockings, the prayer. I mean, I was decked to the nines, okay? And we were on a post, and, this was when my mom came down to visit. She bought me all this stuff because I told her what was going on. And so she dressed me up, and me and Shantae, we get to the house that night, and she was like, "I don't want to do that anymore." And I was already thinking it, but I didn't say it. I didn't voice it. But she was like, "I don't want to do it anymore." I felt like we were on display. I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Like, so when we go to noonday prayer on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was, Tuesday or Wednesday, I was like, okay, we can have a discussion with the lady that was over the ushers, and we could tell her, look, we tried it. We don't like it. We don't got to get into all of the reasons why. We just don't like it, so we don't want to do it anymore. So Shantae like, I bet we going to do that. I'm like, okay. We get to noonday prayer, y'all. And I will never forget. I was good. I had on, that's when not Uggs, Wallabies. That's when Wallabies was popping. I had on a pair of those, some red and black ones, little red shirt, black pants. I was popping. I'm like, all right, we're gonna go in here, we're gonna do this meeting, and we're gonna tell this lady straight up, like, thank you for the opportunity, but we don't want to do this anymore. So we were in agreement. We get there. Afternoon day prayer is over, because I remember I had a class like right after noonday prayer. It was like 1:30. I had a 1:30 class, and I had to be back. So I was like, we're gonna make this quick because I gotta get to school. So boom, we pull the lady in the office. We tell her, thank you for the opportunity. We just don't like it. We feel like, whatever. And we would like to not do it anymore. So she was like, okay, I'm going to talk to Pastor Anderson and I'm going to let her know what y'all said. We're not thinking nothing of it. We just thinking this was the right thing to do. This was protocol. We're going to go to this lady. We're going to tell her what our issue is. And that's going to be it. Y'all, when I tell you I was wrong, like on every account that I assumed something was going to go some way, I was wrong. We get out of the church and we're standing in the parking lot and we're talking to one of the ministers that Shantae is really, really cool with. And I was becoming cool with him and his wife because, again, I hung out with her. So we out there talking to him, and Pastor Anderson burst through the door with her adjutant behind her. We're going to call her Elder Moore. Her and Elder Moore burst out of the door. First it was Pastor Anderson, then Elder Moore came right behind her. So I'm looking, and I'm like, all I hear is, do you have a problem with me? Do you have a problem with me? I didn't know who the lady was talking about. I really didn't know who she was talking about. She got her enforcer back here. We the only ones at the parking lot. Maybe a couple of stragglers over there just talking, having conversation. But I'm like, ain't no way. What do we do? So she burst over there, and she's in our faces. And she says, if you need to get physical, we can get physical. And Shantae says, we can do that too. And I'm like, oh, she really is. She's talking to us. So at this point, I'm stepping up. I'm like, okay, like, what happened? Why is it all this? So she proceeds to recount the conversation she just had with the usher lady. And all this stuff came up. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? Where did that come from? That's not what, like, they were spinning things. These old people were spinning things, trying to keep things going. So by the time I put two and two together and my confusion moved, I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you really came out here and you're trying to fight us because of this, that, and the third? So she was serious. She was dead up. And Elder Moore was right behind her like she always is. And this lady really wanted to fight us because we said we didn't want to be ushers anymore. Y'all, all of this is relevant. I promise. I promise it's relevant. So we standing there, and finally, the minister that we were talking to, he says, I can't let you do that. You're going to have to back up. Basically, he didn't want to disrespect her, and I got it, and I understood. But he like, look, you're going to have to back up. These are two young girls. Y'all not about to do this out here. Y'all making a scene. Church people around. Like, we just got out of noonday prayer. Like, are you serious? So she calms down. I guess she, she came back to herself, and she realized what setting she was in, and she calmed down. And he's like, what happened? So she starts explaining what the situation was. The usher lady, she had booked by this time. She was gone. So she really, she didn't stick around to explain herself or to give us a chance to say, well, that's not true, what she said, blah, 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 blah. This lady did her dirt and she dipped. So we sitting up there talking, we talking. My class had came and went by this time because there was no way in hell that I was about to leave after all of this is going on. You really came out here and you confronted us like you was going to beat us up for saying that we didn't want to usher anymore. So we got past that. We were telling her that Mary said this, that, and the third, and that Mary was... say she took all that, she spent it. It was really nothing negative. We were just having a conversation. I thought we were coming to an understanding, but this involved Mary. So this lady picked up her phone. She dialed Mary's number, and she told her, you and your sister cannot come back to my church anymore. Y'all not welcome here anymore. In my 19, 20 years of life, I had never heard anything like that. And I don't believe I've heard anything like that since. She really got on the phone and she called these people and told them that they were not welcome at her church anymore. Like, how? At the time, I could not fathom what was going on. But now that I'm older, I'm wiser, I realized this lady really had an insecurity. And it started within herself. So anytime she thought that somebody was saying something negative about her, she took it to heart. She took it personal. She couldn't let it go. Like, I've had great pastors in my life, and I've seen them. They hear the negative. It might affect them. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say that it doesn't affect them. They're human first. But I've never seen them react like that. Like, to call the people and tell them that you cannot come back to their church. And I say all that to say, one day we were in a park or whatever, and Pastor Anderson got on the subject of somebody saying that she walks manly. So I'm like, oh, okay. You know, I'm listening to this conversation, but she's not really talking to me. I'm walking behind her. We kind of walking, doing an exercise thing. And me and Shantae are walking. And she says, I don't walk manly. I walk militant. And she turns to me and she said, Nike, what do you think? Do you think that I walk like a man? Do you think I... And I'm like, no. You know, honestly, if I'm being honest, a tad, maybe. But again, I'm 19, 20. I want this lady acceptance. So of course I'm not about to sit here and say, no, I don't think you walk manly, you know. But why are you even addressing stuff like that? Like, so anyway, getting back to the point. After all of that had occurred, she kicked Mary and her sister out of the church. Remind you, they were going to the church before I ever stepped foot in there. But this is how insecure this lady is, right? Okay, y'all. When I tell y'all I just went on a dummy mission trying to find that book, I couldn't find it. But I did manage to locate this book, in which I had this notebook, which I had written like 19 pages about what had happened. But for some reason, I ripped them out because at the time, it just didn't seem like the right time to tell the story. But that just lets you know that was back in like 2004, 2005. It's 2020 now, and it's still affecting me. It's still affecting me for whatever reason. So maybe it's just time. You know, the title that I was going to go with, I got convicted about it. I wasn't going to use that, but I figured I wouldn't use this platform to demonize her, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I want to humanize my story, my side of the story, and what I went through in that ministry. So here we are. Okay, for whatever reason, I can't find the book, but I was looking for it for a specific purpose because it had the notes in it that I had taken that night in Bible study. And basically, she was telling us that God had given her the ability to kind of like put herself in astral projection. That's the way that that's what she called it. But she said it was a God-given ability. And at the time, I didn't know that that had anything to do with witchcraft or that wasn't holy. I didn't know. I'm listening. I'm fascinated. Everything that comes out of this lady's mouth, I'm just like eating it up like it's a 5-course meal, because this is my pastor. This is who's leading me. She has a great following. She's very popular. And I get this for free on Sundays and through the week. So I'm like, okay, let me learn everything that I can learn. So, she's telling us that she has the ability to transport herself into someone else's body. Basically, if you are not prayed up and she prays and she gets a message from the Lord, or who that you're talking about her, or basically she needs to be there, then she can go. So she was talking about this lady named, I'm going to say Alice. She used Alice as an example, and Alice was present that night, and she told her that she was going to, and she's like, yes, you know, because that's what they did. They bowed to her or whatever. So she's like, yes, you can use me as an example. So basically she's saying that one night, Pastor Anderson is saying one night she went and she was praying, and the Lord allowed her to transport to Alice's room. And she sat on the edge of Alice's bed and heard everything that Alice was saying about her. Not her spirit, you know. She's saying physically, she had an out-of-body experience. The Lord took her out of her body, transported her to Alice's home, set her on the end of Alice's bed, and let her hear what Alice was saying about her. So I'm like, oh, like, yo, that's crazy. Alice over there crying. She repenting. She's apologizing. She's saying, you know, I'm sorry, Apostle. Yes, it's true. I shouldn't have never did that. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, Alice's mother over there crying, you know, and God rest their soul. I think Alice passed away, her and her mother, whoever. But God rest their souls. But this is what happened. They were sitting up there crying. They were apologizing, repenting. My little crazy self, I'm like, oh my God, I don't ever want this lady to, mess around and get in her spiritual car, drive to my house, to my natural house, get out her spiritual car, put her spirit in my room, sit on the end of my bed, and hear what I'm saying, because this ain't that. So, I'm so afraid and worked up at this point because this lady is corroborating her story. Alice is corroborating her story. She's saying, yes, this is true. She's crying. Her and her mother are repenting. They got a whole thing going on over here. So absolutely, I believe that it was true. I had no reason to doubt at this point, because if you lying, these people saying you telling the truth. So now your lie has been validated, and I believe it. And I'm scared of the Lord. And I was going after God with everything I had at that point. I was chasing. When they say I'm chasing, that was me. They wrote that song about me. So I'm like, okay. I don't need this in my life. I'm just going to do right. I don't want to be them. I don't want to be made an example out of. So boom. Now, after she said that, I wrote these notes down, and I had these notes, and I can find them every time I'm not looking for them. But I'm just let that go. So we go through, and at this point, Mary, she says to me, she calls us, and she comes over to the apartment, because like I said, we were subletting the apartment from her. And she tells us, blah, blah, blah. She got back in the church. They had to basically kneel at her feet and repent before she would let them back in the church. And they did that. And now she's back. She's back in her spot in the crew. They called it the crew. She was back there. All was well. So we like, okay. But on our end, all hell is breaking loose at this point with Pastor Anderson. Every day, every time I turn around, y'all, there is something else. I mean, there is something else. Every time I try to, go to that church after that happened, something would happen. I got into an accident. I rode down an embankment on the way to church one Sunday morning. And I called Pastor Anderson, and she's like, you got to leave because they're going to charge you with driving too fast for conditions, blah, blah, blah. That's all she had to say. Sis was pieced out. I got up out that embankment, and I rolled out. Thank God I didn't have no damage. I wasn't hurt. I rolled out. The next time, I'm coming on the way to church. I think I was going to prayer. I was headed to prayer again, and I was at a stoplight. I had an accident. This is all on the way to this church. Now, I'm like, God, what are you telling me? I'm still not putting 2 and 2 together. 2 and 2 don't make 4 in my head yet. It's still 6 or something like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm still going to church. Maybe I just need to go a little harder. Maybe God ain't pleased or something like that. So let me go a little harder. Maybe that's why all this stuff is happening. So I'm going. Every time I turn around, something is going on. We are ostracized at this point. When I tell you, these people are talking about us blatantly in our faces. They are talking about us behind our backs. They are just ostracizing at this point. And I'm in rehearsal doing the praise dancing team and choir rehearsal. And in my mind and in my heart, I am miserable. My heart is heavy. I'm like, God, why won't you allow me to stop going to this church? You're not supposed to question God, but it was like I had a drive. I was propelled to keep going to this church. I can't explain it because I've never felt anything like this since. I'm like, God, why will you not allow me to stop going? Look at what is happening. I'm crying. I'm stressed out. I don't know what's going on by myself. My mother is in New Jersey. I can't tell her half of what is going on. I don't want her to worry. I'm thinking I'm grown, trying to handle things on my own. But God, why? Stop me from going to the church. And it continued on like that. I'm still going. I'm still pretending like all is well. I'm still singing on the choir. I'm still praise dancing and this, that, and the third. Until my mother came back, y'all, for a visit. And we were in church one Sunday morning. And Shantae leaned over in my ear while Pastor Anderson was talking. And she said, we got to get the baby a bottle or whatever she said. But you know how, like, when you're younger and like the pastor or the teacher or somebody's talking and you're whispering but you're looking at them also to make sure that, you know, you're not being seen or you're not going to get in trouble. You kind of trying to gauge their reaction and make sure that you're good to whisper over here and they don't see, whatever the case. She was talking to me, but she was looking over like this, and she was just telling me something. We were holding babies. Each one of us were holding a baby, and she's like, I gotta get the baby a bottle. I'm like, okay. Pastor Anderson stopped preaching dead in the middle of her sermon. And she says, Naisha, Shantae, I want to see you in my office along with your parents after church is over. I look at Shantae, Shantae look at me, I look at Shantae, Shantae look at me, and we like, what in the world just happened? Like, what's the problem? So we like, okay, you know, we embarrassed at this point. I seen my mother over there, she on the front row, because again, she was a minister, and she like, she looking puzzled, I'm looking puzzled, I can't understand what is occurring. We go in the office, and it was like she had all of her staff in there because she said she didn't want anything to be taken out of context. Her husband was on the staff. It was some ministers, Elder Moore, her adjutant, her backup. She was in there. And my brother, this guy called my brother, he was outside guarding the door. And so that nobody could come in. The crew was sitting in the back or whatever, close enough to the office so that they can kind of pick up what's going on, but not to the point where it looked obvious that they were listening. So my mom is sitting down. I'm sitting down next to her. I have my head on her shoulder. Shantae is sitting down next to my mother, and her mother is standing on the wall. The office is tight. It's a really tight squeeze. So you got Pastor Anderson sitting at her desk, and then her staff like around her. And she says to us, you know, I saw whatever she said. I don't want to misquote this lady. I don't want to put words in her mouth. She basically told us the reason why she had called us into the office with our parents present. And my mother is just, I mean, I could feel her. She was upset, but she was keeping her cool and she was listening. But I know that look my mother gets when she's upset and she doesn't want to say something. And she had that look on her face. And so I had my head on her shoulder. And Shantae said, well, what about... And Pastor Anderson just interrupted her. And she says, Naisha and Shantae have been sleeping together and they didn't want you to know. Y'all, I'm like, head blown at this point. Like, are you kidding? Are you serious? Like, you really just said this? And Shantae, she pissed at this point. She like, no, look, I don't care what went down in the past. I don't care what people assume. Like, what you're not going to do is you're not going to lie. You know what I'm saying? To further your agenda. But that's what you did. You blurted that out. You not only humiliated us, but you humiliated our parents in front of your staff. You got the crew out here. You did that. So Shantae is pissed at this point. She's standing up. She about to jump over the desk. So she calls for her security. My brother comes in. She tells them to usher Shantae out the church and that she was no longer welcome in her church. So this is the third person she done kicked out since I've been there. Third person. So she kicks her out, tell her don't come back. She's not welcome in her church. Her mother walk out right behind her. They're not, you know, Shantae is confrontational, but her mother is not confrontational. So she walks out behind her. There was nothing else said. My mother and I were sitting there and in disbelief, basically. And she looks at me and she says, I had to hurt you to help you. You know, you just hurt me. You didn't help me do anything. You humiliated my mother. You kicked her out of your church because she was about to say something that probably would have exposed you. And who would have blamed her? But you didn't have to hurt me to help me. You could have just helped me. So that ended that or whatever. We got out of the meeting. My mother, she was shaking mad, fire mad, but she was trying to be humble. You know, this is her leader, or not anymore, but this is the lady who once led her, and this is who is leading me. So my mother, you know, she's a minister, she's a pastor, she's not about to jump crazy. You know, they had their little exchange or whatever, and we left. So you kick my friend out the church, I probably went a couple of more Sundays after that, but honestly, my heart wasn't there anymore because now I'm really beginning to see like there's a problem here. This is not normal. This is not what I'm used to. I grew up apostolic, and I was apostolic to the bone. I didn't see my pastor behaving like this. Norley Green would never. Okay, she would never. So I'm confused at this point. Even the church that we were going to before we went to that church, he would never. He had his faults. He had, like all of them do. Like I said, they're human. But he would have never, okay? He would have confronted you first, and he would have loved on you next. So what is this? This is foreign to me, ma'am. I don't get what you are doing. So I had to go. I had to go. Like I said, I was chasing after God with everything in me, and you just knock me all the way back down. So I'm like, at this point, okay, if you say I am, I'm going to be. I'm going to do what you say that I am, and I'm going to be who you say that I am because, hey, you hear from God, so what you saying must be true. That must be what I am. So my life went crazy after that, y'all. Me and Shantae, we ain't going to the church no more. Mary is back in the church. She's doing what she needs to do to stay in the good graces. So we're still subletting her apartment, but she basically doesn't have much interaction with us. But I understand. I wasn't trying to. She had already compromised her position there because of because of us one time. So I didn't understand, but I understood. I knew that she was doing what she felt like she needed to do. So it's really not much that I could say, but I felt some type of way. So we're going to different churches. We're doing different things. We're visiting. We're trying to see what is another fit for us, because now at this point, we don't have a church home. We done been kicked out. You told me without telling me I wasn't welcome anymore, but you blatantly told Shantae that she wasn't welcome anymore. And you asked God to save her and kill her. Basically, save her and take her up out of here. Those were your words in front of all of these people. I can't get it. I can't understand it. So again, we're younger. We're just looking for acceptance or whatever. We're going through these months where we're not going to the church. We miss the church, but we don't miss the church. We are confused. We're lost. We're wandering, but we're like, okay, we have to do something. So we're sitting in the house one night, and we're cleaning up, and Shantae, this is when VCRs were still a thing. Shantae pulls out a tape out of her things while we're cleaning up, and she puts in the tape of Pastor Anderson doing Street Revival years ago. So we're watching it. I'm like, oh wow, look at that. Y'all look different. We commenting. And it got late in the evening, and I drew a picture. I remember I drew a picture because we were just playing tapes after we cleaned up. While we cleaned up, we were just playing tapes of her. She was just showing me, the contrast between what it is now and what it was then. So that went on for most of the evening. I drew a picture once we were done cleaning, and we were sitting down. We were coloring it. It was like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. We didn't have anything else to do. So we're painting the picture or whatever, and there's a knock at the door. Now, where we lived, it was a very, very dark apartment complex, but we lived on the backside. There was a lady that lived down from us. She kind of would check in on us and everything. We're gonna call her Patricia. Patricia would come and she would check in on us and everything, but she was asleep at this point. Her porch light was off, and we knew that it wasn't her. So we're like, not many people know that we're staying out here, so who could this be? So Shantae is kind of like peeking through the blinds, trying to see who it is that could be out. We didn't get a read on it or whatever. So we open the door, and it's Mary. So we like, Mary, like, what you doing here? Now, Mary is a hairstylist. She's usually well put together. She's not flashy or whatever, but she's usually well put together. This night, Mary came there. She was disheveled. Her shoes were untied. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Like, she's like really robotic speaking or whatever. I'm getting an uneasy feeling. I don't know about Shantae, but I'm like laughing because okay, I'm like giving her the benefit of the doubt. It's 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe she just jumped in her car. She drove from there to here. It's like a 45-minute drive. So maybe she's just, didn't get a chance to get herself together. Or she had a busy day and she didn't get a chance to get herself together. So I kind of calmed down within myself, and Mary comes in the house. She tells us this story that she has to get up the next day and go talk to the manager about the lease or whatever. So she's just going, spend the rest of the night. So we're like, okay, cool. But really, it wasn't cool because I had like the hair on the back of my neck was standing up for some reason, y'all. It was standing up. But I tried to be cool. She commented on the little picture that we were drawing or whatever. She was laughing. She was not herself. So I remember, like I said, the apartment was dark. And so we tried to turn on some lights because we were coloring by the light of the kitchen because we didn't have much furniture. So we were coloring on the floor by the light of the kitchen. So Shantae went to turn the lights on. She said, no, don't turn the lights on. We like, okay, So when we established that she was spending the night, gave her a blanket. And y'all, the blanket was pulled up to here, like to her. All you could see was her eyes and the rest of her head. So again, I'm over here. I'm freaking out inside, but I'm trying to be cool because I'm like, this is Mary. I know Mary, Me and Mary, we thick as thieves. Like, I know her. So, she's older than us or whatever, but we were close. We went to our previous church together. So, long story. She went and she laid down on the couch. And remember I told y'all that we were playing those videos. Well, the video was still playing. And Mary looks over at the TV and she says, I remember when I didn't catch it. Because Mary hadn't been going to her church that long to know when she was doing street revival. By the time we got to her church, she was already pastoring. She was not an evangelist anymore. So she wasn't doing those things but Mary said, I remember when she, so again, that's another red flag in my mind. I'm like, oh no, something's going on here, but I'm not vocalizing any of this. I'm just saying it in my head. I'm scared. I am scared at this point. So at this point, Shantae, I guess she was picking up on my vibes, and y'all, we went in the room together. We went in the bedroom, one of the bedrooms together. And she says to me, I'm going to get a knife. And I said, oh my God, like, I know that there's something prophetic is going on here. Like, because I was thinking the same thing. She said, why do I think that's Pastor Anderson and Mary Body? Y'all, if I'm lying, I am flying. That is the exact same thought that I had. Remind you, we have been kicked out of the church. So we hadn't seen these people in God knows how long. And Mary just shows up 1 o'clock in the morning. Talking about she got to go to a leasing office at 9 o'clock in the morning. So she says, she said, I think that is Pastor Anderson and Mary Body. Y'all, if I could have died and sent up timber that day, I would have died and sent up timber. And I told her, oh my God, I'm thinking the same thing. Like, you confirmed my thoughts. I'm feeling the same way. She says, I'm going to go get a knife. I said, okay. So she went in the kitchen. She snuck a knife down her pants. And she came and she sat in the recliner with me. Remind you, we had a chair over here. We had a chair over here. And the recliner was like at the window. So we sit in this chair together. You know what I mean? Like, we ain't separating at this point because now we done picked up on this evil energy or whatever this is, and we ain't trying to feel it. Mary sits up and says, what you gonna do, chase the spirits away with a knife? Excusez-moi? What did you say? She said, what you gonna do, chase the spirits away with a knife? Y'all, it was getting worse and worse at that point. So we look at each other, we kind of laugh nervously, like, no, what you talking about? Knife? Like, you bugging, you wilding, like, no. So I get up from Shantae. I go sit on the love seat. And Mary looks at me And I guess the light from the little light that was coming in from the blinds, it was shining in my eyes. And she said, "What is that light in your eyes? Why is that light like that in your eyes?" And I'm like, "You don't know." Like, and we sat there like that the rest of the night. We kind of like slept in shifts, if we slept at all. Because at this point we already knew, like, you told us in Bible study that you could do this. God will give you the ability to transport yourself where you need to go, or you can go in somebody else's body if they ain't prayed up. And I really believe that that's what you did at this point. So I'm not going to sleep. Okay, you're not about to. No, I'm not going to sleep. So we sitting up there and we watching her. She sleep. She's snoring. I mean, she out. Covers up to here. Darkness. She didn't want no light. The next morning, she got up and she left as quickly as she came, without a word, without anything. She just got in her car and she left. At the first sign of daylight, she got in her car and left. Now, remind you, I told you, she said she had to be at the leasing office by 9 o'clock. It's early in the day. Why are you leaving so early if you got an appointment with the leasing office by 9 o'clock? She got in her car and she left as quickly as she came. And I called my mother and I told my mother what happened. My mother was here again. She was down in our house and my mother came and she anointed every wall in that apartment. She prayed heaven down in that apartment. And she told Satan he had to flee. And that was good enough for me. Because I really believe that the enemy really had a desire that night, but like God blocked it. And when she asked me, "What is that light in your eyes?" I really believe that that was an angel. And I tell you why I believe that was an angel. When I was about 9 years old, I was living with my grandmother. My room was on this side of the house, and my bed, from my bed, I could see the hallway and I could see the attic, and the attic was down this particular day. My grandmother's and my grandfather's room, it was across from mine. Their room was dark. I was afraid of the dark. I could barely sleep at night. So this particular night, I'm looking in the hallway because the hallway light is on. They left it on for me. I couldn't have my TV on, but they left the hallway light on for me. And I see like this figure from the ceiling to the floor. And I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it. I see this figure from the ceiling to the floor. And he was dressed in like battle gear. I remember he had like the little thing going around him with the bullets in it. He was dressed in battle gear and he was glowing. And for some reason, my little mind computed that as Michael. And I had, I went to Sunday school, but I had no reason to know who Michael the angel was. And I told my grandmother, and she told me who that was. And I didn't know the significance of it then, but I really believe that Michael was with me that day, that night, when I dealt with that thing, that being, whatever it was, coming into our home. Because there is no way. I sat on that recliner with Shantae for the longest time. And when I went by myself, and when I separated from the two and I sat by myself, that light was there, and it alarmed her enough that she had to ask me what that was. It's obvious that light refracts, it comes in from the outside. It's obvious, but she couldn't put two and two together that that's what that was. She asked me, "What is that light coming?" And it alarmed her, and it in turn alarmed me. And it wasn't until I sat down years later and I thought about it and I explained it to my bishop, and my bishop told me, "I'm going to take you there and you're going to have to confront her and tell her how you feel so you can get that off of you." And I was so afraid, y'all. But it dawned on me then that might have been Michael, and that was my reason for seeing him all those years ago. God gave me that vision at 9 years old in my bedroom. He gave me that vision of the hallway, of that attic, and that man was standing there. And I was so afraid. I couldn't go to sleep. But I remember I had to tell my grandmother, and my grandmother said, "Michael, that was Michael the angel." And it didn't make sense to my little mind then, but it makes so much sense to me now. And I thank God that he sent me that angel, that day, that angel of protection that I didn't even know that I needed, that I didn't even know was walking with me. I thank him for sending me that. And I thank him for getting me out of that situation. I thank him for getting me out of that area, because it could have been worse. And when I tell y'all, this video has been therapeutic for me, because that thing has weighed on me for years and years and years. I never forgot it. I think about it often. I think about when I went to her, when I finally worked up the courage after I had left her church, and I said to her what I felt like she did. And I told her that I can't thrive in my current ministry because I'm still holding on to hurt from your ministry. And she said to me, she said, I don't know how you can feel that way when you and I had limited interaction with each other. And at the end of her message, it said, here's the autopsy, now you bury it. And she blocked me. She blocked me right from there. And when I tell y'all, even Mary saw her at the state fair, and they hugged and they got their healing. I never got that healing. And maybe this is what I needed. I sat down to do this video many times, and I was going to call it The Devil Knew Where I Lived. But I had to realize that that is still a woman of God, and that's a disrespectful title. And that's why, until my mind got out of that place where I felt like I needed to title it that, and I was really looking at it in a way that was counterproductive. It wasn't going to help anybody. It was going to expose her, but I don't want to demonize her. I don't wish to demonize her. That's not my point here. My point is to let you know that the devil can go anywhere. The devil can find you. He's always on his job. He's always busy. And I'm not saying that she is the devil. That's not my point. I'm saying that he honestly knew where I lived. And when I said that before, I was talking about her being the devil. But I ain't talking about her being the devil now. The devil himself knew where I lived, and he brought that to my home. And he could have taken me out. But I thank God for an angel. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. Let's talk about it in the comments. Have you had anything happen to you like that? Have you noticed anything weird in ministry? Let's keep it respectful. Like I said, I fear God. So this is not an open forum to bash the church. I just want to know if you guys have ever experienced anything like that in all of your years of life, because I never have before then, and I never have since. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you'll come back, like, comment, and subscribe.